Hi everyone, long time no reading. Today we're gonna do a little reading of Devil in the White City. We're not gonna play at all. We're going to cue in and just spectate while I read. No interruptions, just straight reading. Solos is fine. So I ended up at the cuckoldry sub-chapter, spelled Cuckoldry, just so you don't think I'm making this up. Cuckoldry. And we'll begin at the Holmes's building at 63rd and Wallace, not known widely in the neighborhood as the Castle. The Connor family was in turmoil. Lovely, dark Gertrude, Ned's sister, one day came to Ned in tears and told him she could not stay in the home another moment. She vowed to catch the first train back to Muscatine, Iowa. I've been there. I know exactly where that is. Ned begged her to tell him what had occurred, but she refused. Ned knew that she and a young man had begun courting, and he believed her tears must have resulted from something he had said or done. Possibly the two had been indiscreet, although he did not think Gertrude capable of so drastic a moral lapse. The more he pressed her for an explanation, the more troubled and adamant she became. She wished she had never come to Chicago. It was a blighted, hellish place full of noise and dust and smoke and inhuman towers that blocked the sun, and she hated it, and hated especially this gloomy building and the ceaseless clamor of construction. That sounds eerily like a few places that I've been. It sounds both like Berkeley and Manhattan, New York. Just a lot of structures, not a lot of real space for the sun, which is the whole point of California, you know. We're just gonna land here and make sure we, meet our maker, so to speak, real quick. This is probably the most peaceful part of Fortnite, just landing, you know. We'll give somebody a free kill, just so their egos, Make sure this isn't too loud for... There we go. Where was I? When Holmes came by, she would not look at him. Her color rose. Ned did not notice. Ned hired an express company to collect her trunk and saw her to the station. Still, she would not explain. Through tears, she said goodbye. The train huffed from the station. In Iowa, in safe, bland Muscatine, Gertrude fell ill. An accident of nature. The disease proved fatal. Holmes told Ned how sorry he was to hear of her passing. But in his eyes there was only a flat blue calm, like the lake on a still August morning. With Gertrude gone, the tension between Ned and Julia increased. Their marriage never had been tranquil. Back in Iowa, they had come close to separating. Now again, their relationship was crumbling. Their daughter Pearl became commensurately more difficult to manage, her behavior marked by periods of sullen withdrawal and eruptions of anger. Ned understood none of it. He was of an easygoing, innocent nature, a reporter later observed. He mistrusted nothing. He did not see what even his friends and regular customers saw. Some of my friends told me there was something between Holmes and my wife, he later said. At first, I did not believe it. There we go. Now we can spectate. Despite the warnings and his own mounting uneasiness, Ned admired Holmes. While he, Ned, was but a jeweler in someone else's store, Holmes controlled a small empire and had yet to turn 30 years old. Holmes's energy and success made Ned feel even more smaller than he already was, especially now that Julia had begun looking at him as if he had just emerged from a rendering vat at the stockyards. Thus, Ned was particularly susceptible to an offer from Holmes that seemed likely to increase his own stature in Julia's eyes. Holmes proposed to sell Ned the entire pharmacy, under terms that Ned, naive Ned, found generous beyond all expectations. Holmes would increase his salary from $12 to $18 a week, so that Ned could pay Holmes $6 a week to cover the purchase. So Holmes basically just took more money out of the business so he can give more to... Okay, I see the point. Holmes promised also to take care of all the legal details and to record the transfer with city officials. Ned would get his $12 a week, just as always, but now he would be the owner of a fine store in a prosperous neighborhood, destined to become even wealthier once the World's Fair began operation. Ned accepted, giving no thought to why Holmes would wish to shed such a healthy business. This offer eased his concerns about Holmes and Julia. If Holmes and she were involved in an indiscreet liaison, would he offer Ned the jewel of his Inglewood empire? To Ned's sorrow, he soon found that his new status did nothing to ease the tension between himself and Julia. The ferocity of their arguments only increased, as did the length of the cold silences that filled whatever other time they spent together. Holmes was sympathetic. He bought Ned lunch at the first floor restaurant and told Ned how certain he was that the marriage would be salvaged. Julia was an ambitious woman and clearly a very beautiful one, but she would come to her senses in short order. Holmes's sympathy was disarming. The idea that Holmes might be the cause of Julia's discontent seemed more and more improbable. Holmes even wanted Ned to buy life insurance, for surely once his marital strife subsided, he would want to protect Julia and Pearl from destitution in the event of his death. He recommended that Ned also consider insuring Pearl's life and offer to pay the initial premiums. He bought an insurance man, C.W. Arnold, to meet with Ned. Dude was insuring a dead woman. Arnold explained that he was building a new agency and wanted to sell as many policies as possible in order to attract the attention of the bigger insurance companies. To secure a policy, all Ned had to pay was $1. Arnold said, just $1 to begin protecting his family forever. But Ned did not want a policy. Arnold tried to change his mind. Ned refused and finally told Arnold that if he really needed $1, Ned would simply give him $1. Arnold and Holmes looked at each other, their eyes empty of all expression. Interesting. Doesn't that sentence just ring of evil, right? Arnold and Holmes looked at each other, their eyes empty of all expression after someone just offered them $1 without actually getting any service from it, right? It's like, oh, this dude's a wacko. Soon, creditors began appearing at the pharmacy demanding repayment of mortgages secured by the store's furnishings and its stocks of salves, salves, and ointments and other goods. Ned was unaware of the existence of these debts and believed the creditors were trying to defraud him until they presented documents signed by the previous owner, H. Holmes. Convinced now that these were bona fide debts, Ned promised to pay them as soon as he was able. Here too Holmes was sympathetic, but there was nothing he could do. Any thriving venture accumulated debts. He had he had assumed that Ned understood at least that much about business. At any rate, it was something to which Ned would now have to become accustomed. The sale, he reminded Ned, was final. So he just loaded this Ned guy with a bunch of debt and kind of pieced out without having to pay anything. And Ned doesn't know anything about business, so he just offloaded that. That's very like, that can happen in the stock market too. People just don't realize that it can happen anywhere. Businesses just aren't well kept, right? Businesses like gardens need to be well kept. This dude, where is he? What? Anyways, the latest disappointment rekindled Ned's uneasiness about Holmes and Julia. He began to suspect that his friends might indeed be correct in believing that Holmes and Julia were engaged in an illicit affair. It would explain the change in Julia, certainly, and it might even explain Holmes's sale of the pharmacy, an unstated trade, the store in exchange for Julia. Ned did not yet confront Julia with his suspicions. He told her simply that if her behavior towards him did not change, if her coldness and hostility continued, he and she would have to separate. She snapped. Separation couldn't come too soon to suit me. Damn. But they remained together a short while longer. Their battles became more frequent. Finally, Ned shouted that he was done and the marriage was over. He spent the night in the barber shop on the first floor directly below their apartment. He heard her footsteps as she moved about on the floor above. The next morning, he told Holmes he was leaving and would abandon his interest in the store. When Holmes urged him to reconsider, Ned merely laughed. He moved out and took a new job with a jewelry store in downtown Chicago, H. Purdy & Co. Pearl remained with Julia and Holmes. Ned made one more attempt to win back his wife. I told her after I left the building that if she would return to me and stop her quarreling, we would live together again, but she refused to come back. Ned vowed that one day he would return for Pearl. Soon he left Chicago and moved to Gilman, Illinois, where he met a young woman and began a formal courtship, which compelled him to visit Holmes's building one more time to seek a divorce decree. He got it, but failed to gain custody of Pearl. Rough. With Ned gone and the divorce final, Holmes's interest in Julia began to dissipate. He had promised her repeatedly that he would marry her once the decree was confirmed. But now he found the prospect repulsive. Pearl's sullen, accusing presence had become especially unappealing. At night, after the first floor stores had been closed, Julia and Pearl and the building's other tenants were asleep. He sometimes would descend to the basement, careful to lock the doors behind him, and there ignite the flames of his kiln and marvel at its extraordinary heat. All right, a little me time. We're on to the next subchapter. It's called Vexed, V-E-X-E-D. Burnham saw his family rarely now. By the spring of 1891, he was living full-time in the shanty of Jackson Park. Margaret stayed in Evanston with a few servants who helped her take care of their 5 children. Only a modest train ride separated the Burnhams, but the mountain demands of the fare made the distance as difficult to span as the isthmus, I-S-T-H-M-U-S, isthmus of Panama. Burnham could send telegrams, but they forced a cold and clumsy brevity and afforded little privacy. So Burnham wrote letters, and wrote them often. You must not think this hurry of my life will last forever. He wrote in one letter, I shall stop after the World's Fair. I have made up my mind to this. The exposition had become a hurricane, he said. To be done with this flurry is my strongest wish. Every dawn he left his quarters and inspected the grounds. 6 steam-powered dredges, the size of floating barns, gnawed at the lakeshore, as 5,000 men with shovels and wheelbarrows The horse-drawn graders slowly scraped the landscape raw. Many of the men wearing bowlers, and suit coats, as if they just happened to be passing by and on impulse chose to pitch in. Despite the presence of so many workers, there was a maddening lack of noise and bustle. The park was too big, the men too spread out, to deliver any immediate sense of work being done. The only reliable signs were the black plumes of smoke from the dredges and the ever-present scent of burning leaves from slash piles set aflame by workers. The brilliant white stakes that marked the perimeters of buildings imparted to the land the look of a Civil War burial ground. Burnham did find beauty in the rawness. Among the trees of the wooded island, the long white tents of the contractors' camp gleamed in the sun. A soft white note in the dun-colored landscape, and the pure blue line of the lake horizon made a cheerful contrast to the rugged and barren foreground, but he also found deep frustration. The work advanced slowly, impeded by the worsening relationship between the fair's two ruling bodies, the National Commission and the Exposition Company, and by the architects' failure to get their drawings to Chicago on time. All the drawings were late. Equally aggravating was the fact that there still was no Eiffel Challenge. Moreover, the exposition had entered that precarious early phase common to every great construction project, when unexpected obstacles suddenly emerge. Burnham knew how to deal with Chicago's notoriously flimsy soil, but Jackson Park surprised even him. Initially, the bearing capacity of its ground was practically an unknown quality, as one engineer put it. In March of 1891, Burnham ordered tests to gauge how well the soil would support the grand palaces, then on the architects' drafting tables. Of special concern was the fact that the buildings would be sited adjacent to newly dug canals and lagoons. As any engineer knew, soil under pressure tended to shift to fill adjacent excavations. The fair's engineers conducted the first test 12 feet from the lagoon on ground intended to support the northeast corner of the electricity building. They laid a platform 4 feet deep and loaded it with iron to a pressure of 2,750 pounds per square foot. 22 tons in all. They left it in place for 15 days and found that it settled only 1/4 of an inch. Next, they dug a deep trench 4 feet from the platform. Over the next 2 days, the platform sank another 1/8 of an inch, but no farther. This was good news. It meant that Burnham could use Root's floating grillage for foundations without having to worry about catastrophic settlement. To make sure these properties were constant throughout the park, Burnham had his chief engineer, Abraham Gottlieb, test locations earmarked for other buildings. The tests yielded similar results until Gottlieb's men came to the site intended for George Post's gigantic manufacturers and liberal arts building. The soil destined to support the northern half of the building showed total settlement of less than 1 inch, consistent with the rest of the park. At the southern end of the site, however, the men made a disheartening discovery. Even as workers loaded the platform, it sank at 8 inches. Over the next 4 days, it settled 30 inches more. And it would have continued sinking if the engineers had not simply called off the test. Damn, they were working in a, what's it called? That thing, right? The sand, the sand that sinks. quicksand. They were building on quicksand, man. Of course, nearly all the soil of Jackson Park was competent to support floating foundations, except the one portion destined to bear the fair's biggest and heaviest building. Here, Burnham realized contractors would have to drive piles at least down to hard pan, an expensive complication and a source of additional delay. The problems with this building, however, had only just begun. In April of 1891, Chicago learned the results of the latest mayoral election. In the city's richest clubs, industrialists gathered to toast the fact that Carter Henry Harrison, whom they viewed as overly sympathetic to organized labor, had lost to Hempstead Washburn, a Republican. Burnham, too, allowed himself a moment of celebration. To him, Harrison represented the old Chicago of filth, smoke, and vice, everything the fair was designed to repudiate. The celebrations were tempered, however, by the fact that Harrison had lost by the narrowest of margins, fewer than 4,000 votes. What's more, he had achieved this near victory without the support of a major party. Shunned by the Democrats, he had run as an independent. Damn. Isn't that funny? Someone's just like preying on their downfall. Preying on someone's downfall that bad that they're celebrating his loss. But, I guess money does that to people. Elsewhere in the city, Patrick Prendergast grieved. Harrison was his hero, his hope. The margin was so narrow, however, that he believed that if Harrison ran again, he would win. Prendergast resolved to double his own efforts to help Harrison succeed. In Jackson Park, Burnham faced repeated interruptions stemming from his de facto role as an ambassador to the outside world, charged with cultivating goodwill and future attendance. Mostly these banquets, talks, and tours were time-squandering annoyances. As in June 1891, when at the request of Director General Davis, Burnham hosted a visit to Jackson Park by a battalion of foreign dignitaries that consumed 2 full days. Others were purely a pleasure. A few weeks earlier, Thomas Edison, known widely as the Wizard of Menlo Park, had paid a visit to Burnham's shanty. Burnham showed him around. Edison suggested the exposition use incandescent bulbs rather than our lights, because the incandescent variety produced a softer light. Where our lights could not be avoided, he said, they should be covered with white globes. And of course, Edison urged the fair to use direct current, DC, the prevailing standard. Right, AC/DC, got it. The civility of this encounter believed a caustic battle being waged outside Jackson Park for the rights to illuminate the exposition. On one side was General Electric Company, which had been created when J.P. Morgan took over Edison's company and merged it with several others, and which now proposed to install a direct current system to light the fair. On the other side was Westinghouse Electric Company, with a bid to wire Jackson Park for alternating current, AC, using patents that its founder, George Westinghouse, had acquired a few years earlier from Nikola Tesla. General Electric offered to do this job for $1.8 million, insisting the deal would not earn a penny profit. A number of exposition directors held General Electric stock and urged William Baker, president of the fair since Lyman Gage's April retirement, to accept the bid. Baker's refusal, calling it extortionate, General Electric rather miraculously came back with a bid of $550,000. But Westinghouse, whose AC system was inherently cheaper and more efficient, bid $399,000. The exposition went with Westinghouse and helped change the history of electricity. That's interesting. So, oh, that's funny how that works, right? So, I mean, a bunch of people, the lobbyists, if you will, they have a lot of stock in Edison, and Edison was essentially the person vying for, hey, use my system. My system works. My system is the future. My system is this and that, and we'll only do it for $1.8 million, which, if we're going to be honest, $1.8 million in payment compared to, $399,000 that it went for, the project I'm speaking of, it sounds like a lot of money. My opinion on what this really was a bribe, right? It feels like a bribe. It feels like the people who were saying go with Edison, had stock in Edison, right? Well, they had stock in JP Morgan, which was Edison at that point, I guess. I didn't know that either. I didn't know JP Morgan was Edison's company, or Edison was JP Morgan's company. Sorry, I don't mean to confuse the two. But the fact that General Electric had a bunch of stockholders saying, hey, go with these guys, they know what they're doing. I mean, the fact that is just like prime corruption, right? That's just prime corruption. And in an age where even technology can't stop that, right? People having ulterior motives for you to use this system versus that one because, it sounds like a good system, but you really know why you're doing it, right? It's because you have stock in it. Very interesting. The source of Burnham's greatest dismay was the failure of the architects to finish their drawings on schedule. If he had once been obsequious to Richard Hunt and the Eastern men, he was not now. Okay, so you're like forgiving in a way. In a June 2nd, 1891 letter to Hunt, he wrote, "We are at a dead standstill waiting for your scale drawings. Can't we have them as they are and finish here?" ? Right, they just got to get on schedule, or at least the perception of being on schedule, right? They got to give the perception of, hey, we have a big project to get done, and we're not even in the ballpark of getting it done. And a big part of that is because the people whose template we're supposed to follow, they're not even ready. Like, they're not even here. We're waiting on you, but you seem to be nowhere to be found. See how long I can last here. I wonder. Let's see. I'm just gonna enjoy myself here. Enjoy the view, right? I like that. If Fortnite could describe what I'm feeling right now, just reading in peace, some good little lo-fi music in the background, my book, had a good day, feeling like I'm going in the right direction, so to speak, in life. This view, man, wow, what a great view. Continuing on, 4 days later, he again preceded Hunt. "The delay you are causing us by not forwarding scale drawings is embarrassing in the extreme." That same month, a serious, if unavoidable, interruption hobbled the landscape department. Olmsted became ill, severely so. He attributed his condition to poisoning from an arsenic-based pigment called turkey red in the wallpaper of his Brookline home. It may, however, simply have been another bout of deep blue melancholia. I don't know that was okay. Melancholia. The kind that had assailed him off and on for years. During his recuperation, Olmsted ordered bulbs and plants for cultivation in 2 large nurseries established on the fairgrounds. He ordered Dusty Miller, Carpet Bugle, President Garfield Heliotrope, Speedwell, Pennyroyal, English and Algerian ivies, verbena, vinca, and a rich palette of geraniums, among them Black Prince, Christopher Columbus, Mrs. Turner, Crystal Palace, Happy Thought, and Jeanne d'Arc. He dispatched an army of collectors to the shores of Lake Calumet, where they gathered 27 train carloads of iris, sedge, bulrush, and other semi-aquatic plants and grasses. They collected an additional 4,000 crates of pond lily roots, which Olmsted's men quickly planted, only to watch most of the roots succumb to the ever-changing levels of the lake. Right, that's rough. In contrast to the lush growth within the nurseries, the grounds of the park had been scraped free of all vegetation. Workers enriched the soil with 1,000 carloads of manure shipped from the Union stockyards and another 2,000 collected from the horses working in Jackson Park. Damn, no wonder the grass is good. Jeez, I can imagine. The presence of so much exposed earth and manure became a problem. It was bad enough during the hot weather, when a south wind could blind the eyes of man and a beast, wrote Rudolph Ulrich, or Ulrich, however you pronounce it, Olmsted's landscape superintendent at the park. But still worse during wet weather, the newly filled ground, which was still undrained, becoming soaked with water. Horses sank to their bellies. It was midsummer 1891 by the time the last of the architect's drawings were completed. As each set came in, Burnham advertised for bids, recognizing that the architect's delays had put everything behind schedule. He inserted into the construction contracts clauses that made him a Caesar, as the Chicago Tribune put it. Each contract contained a tight deadline for completion, with a financial penalty for every day beyond. Burnham had advertised the first contract on May 14th. This, for the mines building. He wanted it finished by the end of the year. That left at best about 7 months for construction, roughly the amount of time a 21st century homeowner would need to build a new garage. He is the arbiter of all disputes, and no provision is made for an appeal from his decision, the Tribune reported. If in the opinion of Mr. Burnham the builder is not employing a sufficient force of men to complete the work on time, Mr. Burnham is authorized to engage men himself and charge the cost to the builder. The mines building was the first of the main exposition buildings to begin construction. But the work did not start until July 3rd, 1891. I'm going to scratch my ear a little bit. With less than 16 months remaining until dedication day, as construction of the building at last got underway, anticipation outside the park began to increase. Colonel William Cody, Buffalo Bill, sought a concession for his Wild West show, newly returned from a hugely successful tour in Europe, but the fair's Committee on Ways and Means turned him down on grounds of incongruity. Undetermined, Cody secured rights to a large parcel of land adjacent to the park. In San Francisco, a 21-year-old entrepreneur named Sol Bloom realized that the Chicago Fair would let him at least take advantage of an asset he had acquired in Paris 2 years earlier. Entranced by the Algerian village at the Paris Exposition, he had bought the rights to display the village and its inhabitants at future events. The Ways and Means Committee rejected him too. He returned to San Francisco, intent on trying a different, more oblique means of winning a concession, one that ultimately would get him a lot more than he had bargained for. Meanwhile, young Lieutenant Schufelt had reached Zanzibar. On July 20th, he telegraphed Exposition President William Baker that he was confident he would acquire as many pygmies from the Congo as he wished, provided the King of Belgium consented. President Baker wants these pygmies, the Tribune said, and so does everybody else around headquarters. On the drafting board, the fair did look spectacular. The centerpiece was the Grand Court, which everyone had begun calling the Court of Honor. With its immense palaces like Hunt, Post, Peabody, and the rest, the court by itself would be a marvel. By now, nearly every state in the nation was planning a building, as were some 200 companies and foreign governments. The exposition promised to surpass the Paris Exposition on every level that is, except one. And that persistent deficit troubled Burnham. The fair still had nothing planned that would equal, let alone eclipse, the Eiffel Tower. At nearly 1,000 feet in height, the tower remained the tallest structure in the world and an insufferable reminder of the triumph of the Paris Exposition. To out Eiffel, had become a battle cry among the directors. A competition held by the Tribune brought a wave of implausible proposals. C.F. Richel of Bridgeport, Connecticut, suggested a tower with a base 100 feet high by 500 feet wide, within which Richel proposed to nest a second tower, and in this one, a third. At intervals, a complicated system of hydraulic tubes and pumps would cause the towers to telescope slowly upward. A journey, several hours. Then allow them to sink slowly back to their original configuration. The top of the tower would house a restaurant, although possibly a bordello would have been more apt. Another investor, J.B. McCumber, representing the Chicago Tower Spiral Spring Ascension and Toboggan Transportation Company, proposed a tower with a height of 8,947 feet, nearly 9 times the height of the Eiffel Tower, with a base 1,000 feet in diameter, sunk 2,000 feet into the earth. Elevated rails would lead from the top of the tower all the way to New York, Boston, Baltimore, and other cities. Visitors ready to conclude their visit to the fair and daring enough to ride elevators to the top would then toboggan all the way back home. As the cost of the tower and its slides of its secondary importance, McCumber noted, I do not mention it here, but will furnish figures upon application. A third proposal demanded even more courage from visitors. This investor, who gave his initials as RTE, envisioned a tower 4,000 feet tall, from which he proposed to hang a 2,000-foot cable of quote-unquote best rubber. Attached at the bottom end of this cable would be a car seating 200 people. What are you, nuts? 200 people. So what are those rides at the fair where you're on a string, but the string has like a little bench on it, right? And that little bench gets swung around, but you're not 4,000 feet in the air. Let's continue. Oh, sorry. Next page. Attached at the bottom end of this cable would be a car seating 200 people. The car and its passengers would be shoved off a platform and fall without restraint to the end of the cable, where the car would snap back upwards and continue bouncing until it came to a stop. Okay, so it's gosh, what is that called? Bungee jumping? What is Yes, so they wanted to build, this dude specifically wanted to build a building where this would be 2,000 feet high, right? This is just like a railing, right? But this specifically would be a building. These strings would essentially just be connected to the building. Instead of these strings being connected to a human, they would have connected to a physical, like a immovable car, right? It's just like a cart, more so, right? A little cup for everybody to be held on. And you would kind of death drop your way until you came to a stop. Kind of like a, what's the term? Gosh. I'm trying to think of like Tower of Terror. So they were trying to build a Tower of Terror. Advertisements just make me sad nowadays, man. The fact that you have to advertise shit like water. Smart water. So they were trying to build a Tower of Terror where, yeah, this is what they were doing, right? Very interesting. This is your little cart. This is the building. So this is a thing. It just doesn't have the exact presentation that you might think. Right, there's the drop. Okay. You're at the top and you're dropping. You're going all the way. I've been on this thing. It's pretty fun. Pretty cool. I'll watch that later. Let's continue reading. So needless to say, this was a very aspirational exposition they were going on. Let's see how it ends. The engineer urged that as a precaution, the ground, quote unquote, be covered with 80 feet of feather bedding. Oh, dude, they had no clue what was going to happen. They were just kind of winging it, if you will. Everyone was thinking in terms of towers, but Burnham, for one, did not think a tower was the best approach. Eiffel had done it first and best. More than merely tall, his tower was grace frozen in iron. As much an evocation of the spirit of the age as Chartres had been in its time. Chartres, Chartres, Chartres had been in its time. To build a tower would be to follow Eiffel into territory he already had conquered for France. In August of 1891, Eiffel himself telegraphed the directors to ask if he might submit a proposal for a tower. This was a surprise, and at first a welcome one. Exposition President Baker immediately cabled Eiffel that the directors would be delighted to see whatever he proposed. If the fair was to have a tower, Baker said in an interview, M. Eiffel is the man to build it. It would not be so much of an experiment if he should be in charge of its construction. He might be able to improve on his design for the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and I think it fair to assume that he would not construct one in any way inferior to that famous structure. To the engineers of America, however, this embrace of Eiffel was a slap in the face. Over the next week and a half, telegrams shot from city to city, engineer to engineer, until the story became somewhat distorted. Suddenly, it seemed as if an Eiffel Tower in Chicago was a certainty, that Eiffel himself was to do the out-Eiffeling. Interesting. The engineers were outraged. A long letter of protest arrived at Burnham's office, signed by some of the nation's leading engineers. Acceptance of the distinguished gentleman's offer, they wrote, would be equivalent to a statement that the great body of civil engineers in this country, whose noble works attest their skill abroad as well as throughout the length and breadth of the land, lack the ability to cope with such a problem, and such action could have a tendency to rob them of their just claim to professional excellence. Yeah, that makes sense. It's an ego thing, right? But it's also like, hey, we're open about the fact that we give you props. Let us show you what we can do. You're the master with the Eiffel Tower. You're not going to out Eiffel, right? You're going to have to renovate and innovate yourself and hope that your originality is just better than other people's, remixes or whatever. Your originality is better than other people's originality of their own, right? So it's never going to be better. It's just preference, right? Some people like the Eiffel Tower. Some people like One World Trade, all right? Some people like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Some people like other things, right? So it's preference. Burnham read this letter with approval. It pleased him to see America's civil engineers at last expressing passion for the fair. Although in fact the directors had promised nothing to Eiffel, his formal proposal arrived a week later, envisioning a tower that was essentially a taller version of what he had built in Paris. All right, so nothing innovative. He was just that's kind of his calling card, right? He can build an Eiffel Tower, and that's all he can do. The directors sent his proposal out to the translation, reviewed it, and then graciously turned it down. If there was to be a tower at the fair, it would be an American tower. But the drafting boards of America's engineers remained dishearteningly barren. Sol Bloom, back in California, nice, took his quest for a concession, his Algerian village, to an influential San Francisco. Mike DeYoung, publisher of the San Francisco Chronicle and one of the exposition's national commissioners, Bloom told him about the rights he had acquired in Paris and how the exposition had rebuffed his petition. Somebody won, nice. DeYoung knew Bloom. As a teenager, Bloom had worked in DeYoung's Alcazar Theater, and worked his way up to becoming its treasurer at the age of 19. In his spare time, Bloom had organized the ushers, checkers, and refreshment sellers into a more efficient, cohesive structure that greatly increased the theater's profits and his own salary. Next, be organized these functions at other theaters and received regular commissions from each. At the Alcazar, he inserted into scripts the names of popular products, bars, and restaurants, including the Cliff House, and for this received another stream of income. He also organized a cater of professional applauders known as a clique. So like clique, but claque, CLAQUE, to provide enthusiastic ovations, demand encores, and cry brava for any performer willing to pay. Most performers did pay. Even the most famous diva of the time, Adelina Patti. One day, Bloom saw an item in a theatrical publication about a novel Mexican band that he believed Americans would adore, and he convinced the band's manager to let him bring the musicians north for a tour. Bloom's profit was $40,000. At the time, he was only 18. Good for that guy, man. Part of me was kind of hoping that Endgame, I would just kind of be lost in the sauce. I'm gonna see if I can. Let's see if I can pull this off. I'm not gonna play. I want to land at the peak of this, or just land somewhere where, people typically don't look for people staying there, right? If I can land at these peaks, that'd be prime. Can't land here. Okay. Maybe I can land here. Let's get a nice view. View of the islands. That's a nice view. I like that. That's a good setup. All right, I think we win. I'm already winning. Don't worry about it. DeYoung told Bloom he would investigate the situation. 1 week later, he summoned Bloom back to his office. How soon could you be ready to go to Chicago, he asked. Bloom, startled, said, in a couple of days, I guess. He assumed DeYoung had arranged a second opportunity for him to petition the fair's Ways and Means Committee. He was hesitant and told DeYoung he saw no value in making the journey until the exposition's director had a better idea of the kinds of attractions they wanted. The situation was advanced since our talk, DeYoung said. All we need now is somebody to take charge. He gave Bloom a cable from the exposition company that empowered DeYoung to hire someone to select the concessions for the Midway Plaisance and guide their construction and promotion. You've been elected, he said. I can't do it, Bloom said. He did not want to leave San Francisco. I completely understand why. Even if I did, I've got too much at stake here to consider it. DeYoung watched him. I don't want to hear another word from you till tomorrow, he said. In the meantime, DeYoung wanted Bloom to think about how much money he would have to be paid to overcome his reluctance. When you come back, you can name your salary, he said. I will either accept or reject it. There will be no argument. Is this agreeable? Bloom did agree, but only because DeYoung's request gave him a graceful way of refusing the job. All he had to do, he figured, was name such an outrageous sum that DeYoung could not possibly accept it. And as I walked down the street, I decided what it would be. Burnham tried to anticipate every conceivable threat to the fair, aware of Chicago's reputation for vice and violence. Burnham insisted on the creation of a large police force, the Columbian Guard, and placed it under the command of Colonel Edmund Rice, a man of great valor who had faced Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. Unlike conventional police departments, the Guard's mandate explicitly emphasized the novel idea of preventing crime rather than merely arresting wrongdoers after the fact. That is missing in this country a little bit, not too much. I wouldn't say too much, but yeah. Disease, too, posed dangers to the fair. Burnham knew. An outbreak of smallpox or cholera or any other lethal infection that roamed the city could irreparably taint the exposition and destroy any hopes the directors had of achieving the record attendance necessary to generate a profit. By now, the new science of bacteriology, pioneered by Robert Koch and Louis Pasteur, had convinced Robert Koch, really? Had convinced most public health officials that contaminated drinking water caused the spread of cholera and other bacterial diseases. Chicago's water teemed with bacteria, thanks mainly to the Chicago River. In a monumental spasm of civic engineering, the city in 1871 reversed the river's direction so that it no longer flowed into Lake Michigan, but ran instead into the Des Plaines River, and ultimately into the Mississippi. The theory being that the immense flows of both rivers would dilute the sewage to harmless levels, a concept downriver towns like Joliet did not wholeheartedly embrace. To the engineers' surprise, however, prolonged rains routinely caused the Chicago River to regress and again pour dead cats and fecal matter into the lake. Gross. And in such volume that tendrils of black water reached all the way to the intake cribs of the city's water system. Most Chicago residents had no choice but to drink the water. Burnham, however, believed from the start that the fair's workers and visitors needed a better, safer supply. In this, too, he was ahead of the age. On his orders, his sanitary engineer, William S. McHarg, built a water sterilization plant on the fairgrounds that pumped lake water through a succession of large tanks in which the water was aerated and boiled. McHarg's men set big casks of this sterilized water throughout the park and replenished them every day. Burnham planned to close the purification plant by opening day and give visitors a choice between two other supplies of safe water: lake water purified with pasture filters and offered free of charge, or naturally pure water for a penny a cup. Piped 100 miles from the coveted springs of Waukesha, Wisconsin. In November 1891, Burnham ordered McHarg to investigate 5 of Waukesha's springs to gauge their capacity and purity, but to do so quietly, suggesting he was aware that running a pipeline through the village's comely landscape might prove a sensitive issue. No one, however, could have imagined that in a few months, McHarg's efforts to secure a supply of Waukesha's best would lead to an armed encounter in the middle of a fine Wisconsin night. I can imagine. What most worried Burnham was fire. The loss of the Grannis block, with his and Root's headquarters, remained a vivid, humiliating memory. A catastrophic fire in Jackson Park could destroy the fair, yet within the park, fire was central to the construction process. Plasterers used small furnaces called salamanders to speed drying and curing. Tinners and electricians used fire pots for melting, bending, and fusing. Even the fire department used fire. Steam engines powered the pumps on the department's horse-drawn fire trucks. Burnham established defenses that by prevailing standards seemed elaborate, even excessive. He formed an exposition fire department and ordered the installations of hundreds of fire hydrants and telegraphic alarm boxes. He commissioned the construction of a fireboat, the Fire Queen, built specifically to negotiate the park's shallow canals and to pass under its many low bridges. Design specifications required that every building be surrounded by an underwater main and be plumbed with interior standpipes. He also banned all smoking on the grounds, although here he made at least two exceptions, one for a contractor who pleaded that his crew of European artisans would quit if denied their cigars, the other for the big hearth in his own shanty, around which he and his engineers, draftsmen, and visiting architects gathered each night for wine, talk, and cigars. With the onset of winter, Burnham ordered all hydrants packed in horse manure to prevent freezing. On the coldest days, the manure steamed as if the hydrants themselves were on fire. When Saul Bloom returned to the office of Mike DeYoung, he was confident DeYoung could not possibly accept his salary request, for he had decided to ask for the same salary as the President of the United States, $50,000. The more I thought about it, Bloom recalled, the more I enjoyed the prospect of telling Mike DeYoung that no less a sum could compensate me for my sacrifice in leaving San Francisco. DeYoung offered Bloom a seat. His expression was sober and expectant. Bloom said, "Much as I appreciate the compliment, I find that my interests lie right here in this city. As I look ahead, I can see myself." DeYoung cut him off, softly said, "Now, Saul, I thought you were going to tell me how much you wanted us to pay you." "I didn't want you to think I didn't appreciate." "You said that a minute ago," DeYoung said. "Now tell me how much money you want." This was not going quite the way Bloom had expected. With some trepidation, Bloom told him the number, $1,000 a week. DeYoung smiled. "Well, that's pretty good pay for a fellow of 21, but I have no doubt you'll earn it." In August, Burnham's chief structural engineer, Abraham Gottlieb, made a startling disclosure. He had failed to calculate wind loads for the fair's main building. Burnham ordered his key contractors, including Agnew and Company, erecting the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building, to stop work immediately. For months, Burnham had been combating rumors that he had forced his men to work at too fast a pace and that as a result, some buildings were unsafe. In Europe, press reporters held that certain structures had been condemned. Now here was Gottlieb conceding a potentially catastrophic error. Gottlieb protested that even without an explicit calculation of wind loads, the buildings were strong enough. "I could not, however, take this view," Burnham wrote in a letter to James Dredge, editor of the influential British magazine Engineering. Burnham ordered all designs strengthened to withstand the highest winds recorded over the previous 10 years. "This may be going to extremes," he told Dredge, "but to me it seems wise and prudent, in view of the great interests involved." Gottlieb resigned. Burnham replaced him with Edward Shankland, an engineer from his own firm who possessed a national reputation as designer of bridges. On November 24th, 1891, Burnham wrote to James Dredge to report that once again he was under fire over the issue of structural integrity. The criticism now, he wrote, is that the structures are unnecessarily strong. All right. You can never make anybody happy. I get that. I'm going to continue, but I see 13 people here left. Is there any way I can wonder if you can win this way. Let me position. Just, I know it's a long swim. This is peaceful, you know. I'm not trying to win here. I'm just trying to read and enjoy the reading. All right, this will be an interesting game. 9 people left. Bloom arrived in Chicago and quickly discovered why so little had been accomplished at the Midway Plaisance, known officially as Department M. Until now, it had been under the control of Frederick Putnam, a Harvard professor of ethnology. He was a distinguished anthropologist, but putting him in charge of the Midway, Bloom said years later, was about as intelligent a decision as it would be today to make Albert Einstein manager of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's circus. Okay, so yeah, this dude had no place doing what he was doing, basically, is what he's saying. Putnam would not have disagreed. He told a Harvard colleague he was, quote unquote, anxious to get this whole Indian circus off my hands. Bloom took his concerns to Exposition President Baker, who turned him over to Burnham. You are a very young man indeed, to be in charge of the work entrusted to you, Burnham said. But Burnham himself had been young when John B. Sherman walked into his office and changed his life. I want you to know that you have my full confidence, he said. You are in complete charge of the Midway. Go ahead with the work. You are responsible only to me. I will write orders to that effect. Good luck. By December of 1891, the 2 buildings farthest along were the Miners' Building and the Women's Building. Construction of the Mines Building. Construction of the Mines Building had gone smoothly, thanks to a winter that, by Chicago standards, had been mercifully benign. Construction of the Women's Building, however, had become an ordeal, both for Burnham and its young architect, Sophia Hayden, mainly because of modifications demanded by Bertha Honora Palmer, head of the fair's Board of Lady Managers, which governed all things at the fair having to do with women. As the wife of Potter Palmer, she was accustomed by wealth and absolute social dominance to having her own way, as she had made clear earlier in the year when she suppressed a revolt led by the board's executive secretary that had caused open warfare between factions of elegantly coiffed and dressed women. In the thick of it, one horrified lady manager had written to Mrs. Palmer, "I do hope that Congress will not become disgusted with our sex." Hayden came to Chicago to produce final drawings, then returned home, leaving their execution to Burnham. Construction began July 9th. Workers began applying the final coat of staff in October. Hayden returned in December to direct the decoration of the building's exterior. Believing this to be her responsibility, she discovered that Bertha Palmer had other ideas. Jeez. Drama. How am I still alive in this thing? In September, without Hayden's knowledge, Palmer had invited women everywhere to donate architectural ornaments for the building, and in response had received a museum's worth of columns, panels, sculpted figures, window grills, doors, and other objects. Palmer believed the building could accommodate all the contributions, especially those sent by prominent women. Hayden, on the other hand, knew that such a hodgepodge of materials would result in an aesthetic abomination. When an influential Wisconsin woman named Flora Ginty sent an elaborately carved wooden door, Hayden turned it down. Ginty was hurt and angry. "When I think of the days I worked and the miles I traveled to achieve these things for the women's building, my ire rises a little yet." Mrs. Palmer was in Europe at the time, but her private secretary, Laura Hayes, a gossip of virtuistic scope, made sure her employer learned all the details. Hayes also relayed to Palmer a few words of advice that she herself had given the architect. "I think it would be better to have the building look like a patchwork quilt." Wait, let me see if I can move here. Let's see if I can. Oh, I tried. I kind of want to see how this one ends. I'm assuming they're not too good because, I mean, nobody found me, right? Oh, look at these guys. Oh, this dude's fighting with a drill. No chance. All right, Batman, let's see what you got. Got a bat? I would use the bat. Let them duke it out. You third party. Someone's in that bush. Someone's behind the rock. Is the shotgun really the play here? I don't know if that was wise. Now they know where you are, and you gotta go to them. Charge it up. Swing. I like this endgame. I like this. Batman looks like a decent player. Looks like he's using the bat well. Swing that dude into the... Yeah. Dude, swing that dude back into the ozone. Don't worry about this guy. No. Don't worry about shooting him. That bat. Get that. Yeah. Go ahead. Swing him back into the... There you go. There. You win. No. What do we... This is such a weird play. They're both a little nervous, I can tell. I don't know what the drill guy is doing. I really don't. It doesn't look like he knows how to use the drill very well. which can lead to, you know, no, don't chase him. Don't chase him. That storm's doing all the damage you need. Yeah. GG, Batman. GG. Flawless victory? You know, it wasn't flawless, but it was a victory, so I suppose. Let me continue here. What time is it? About to be 11? Just gonna check up on 78%, 45%, checking, just checking. I won't make this video run too long. We'll finish this subchapter and then we'll be done with the video for today. How long do we have left? Let me see. We have oh, we're basically already there. I think it would be better to have the building look like a patchwork quilt than to refuse these things which the lady managers have been to such pains in soliciting. A patchwork quilt was not what Hayden had in mind. Despite Mrs. Palmer's blinding social glare, Hayden continued to decline donations. A battle followed, fought in true Gilded Age fashion, with oblique snubs and poisonous courtesy. Mrs. Palmer pecked and pestered and catapulted icy smiles into Hayden's deepening gloom. Finally, Palmer assigned the decoration of the woman's building to someone else, a designer named Candace Wheeler. Candace Wheeler. Yeah, I mean, the boss is, what are you gonna do, right? When the boss says no, and you don't have that creative liberty to kind of call your own shot, you know, what are you really going to, what are you really gonna do, right? You can obviously act as though, you know, oh no, that's fine. And it's not, but this person decided to go ahead and, you know, make it known that they don't agree with what's being proposed for the project. And it came back to bite her in the behind. This place usually gets some action, so. Hayden fought the arrangement in her quiet. Hayden fought the arrangement in her quiet, stubborn way until she could take it no longer. She walked into Burnham's office, began to tell him her story, and promptly, literally, went mad. Tears, heaving sobs, cries of anguish, all of it. A severe breakdown. An acquaintance called it, with a violent attack of high nervous excitement of the brain. Burnham, stunned, summoned one of the exposition surgeons. Hayden was discreetly driven from the park in one of the fair's innovative English ambulances, with quiet rubber tires, and placed in a sanitarium for a period of enforced rest. She lapsed into melancholia, a sweet name for depression. I didn't know that. At Jackson Park, aggravation was endemic. Simple matters, Burnham found, often became imbroglios. Even Olmsted had become an irritant. He was brilliant and charming, but once fixed on a thing, he was as unyielding as a slab of Joliet limestone. By the end of 1891, the question of what kind of boats to allow on the fair's waterways had come to obsess him. as if boats alone would determine the success of his quest for poetic mystery. In December of 1891, Burnham received a proposal from a tugboat manufacturer arguing the case for steam launches at the exposition. Olmsted got wind of it from Henry Codman, who, in addition to being his chief operating man in Chicago, served as a kind of spy, keeping Olmsted abreast of all threats to Olmsted's vision. Codman sent Olmsted a copy of the letter, adding his own note that the tugboat maker seemed to enjoy Burnham's confidence. On December 23rd, Olmsted wrote to Burnham, "I suspect that even Codman is inclined to think that I make too much of a hobby of this boat question and give an amount of worry, if not thought, to it that it would be better expected on other and more critical matters. And I fear that you may think me a crank upon it." He proceeded, however, to vent his obsession yet again. The tug maker's letter, he complained, framed the boat question solely in terms of moving the greatest number of passengers between different points at the exposition as cheaply and quickly as possible. You perfectly well know that the main object to be accomplished was nothing of this sort. I need not to try to make a statement of what it was. You are as alive to it as I am. You know that it was a poetic object, and you know that if boats are to be introduced on these waters, it would be perfect nonsense to have them of a kind that would antagonize this poetic object. Mere transportation was never the goal, he fumed. The whole point of having boats was to enhance the landscape. Put in the waters unbecoming boats, and the effect would be utterly disgusting, destroying the value of what would otherwise be the most valuable original feature of the exposition, right? So they wanted to be part of the exposition, not the exposition itself, right? I say destroy deliberately. 1,000 times better to have, 1,000 times better have no boats. To have boats than to have no boats is what they're trying to say. Despite increasing committee interference and intensified conflict between Burnham and Director General Davis, and with the threat of labor strikes ever present, the main building rose. Workers laid foundations of immense timbers in crisscrossed layers in accord with Root's grilage principle, then used steam-powered derricks to raise the tall posts of iron and steel that formed each other's frame. They cocooned the frames and scaffolds of wood and faced each frame with hundreds of thousands of wooden planks to create walls capable of accepting 2 thick layers of staff. As workers piled the mountains of fresh lumber beside each building, jagged foothills of sawdust and scrap rose nearby. The air smelled of cut wood and Christmas. In December, the exposition experienced its first death. A man named Mueller at the Mines Building, dead of a fractured skull. 3 other deaths followed in short order. Jansen, fractured skull, Electricity Building. Allard, fractured skull, Electricity Building. Algier, stunned to oblivion by a new phenomenon, electric shock, at the Mines Building. Jeez. Dozens of lesser accidents occurred as well. Publicly, Burnham struck a pose of confidence and optimism. In a December 28, 1891 letter to the editor of the Chicago Herald, he wrote, "A few questions of design and plan are still undetermined, but there is nothing which is not well in hand, and I see no reason why we will not be able to complete our work in time for the ceremonies in October 1892, Dedication Day. And for the opening of the exposition, May 1st, 1893. In reality, the fair was far behind schedule, with worse delay forestalled only by the winter's mildness. The October dedication was to take place inside the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building. Yet as of January, only the foundation of the building had been laid. For the fair to be even barely presentable in time for the ceremony, everything would have to go perfectly. The weather especially would have to cooperate. Meanwhile, banks and companies were failing across America. Strikes threatened everywhere, and cholera had begun a slow white trek across Europe, raising fears that the first plague ships would soon arrive in New York Harbor. As if anyone needed extra pressure, the New York Times warned. The failure of the fair or anything short of a positive and pronounced success would be a discredit to the whole country and not to Chicago alone. All right, and that is that subchapter. Remains of the Day will be the next subchapter. So we're gonna spectate a little bit. I'm gonna see how far are we along in the video. Oh, hour 30. That's perfect. We can watch the end of this until the game. Then we can do a little commentating. 25 left, not bad. Turned off my flashlight so nothing is interrupting me. This is a very, very calm environment. Like watch this in bed, you know, because it is Fortnite, but it's like chill, right? Your brain isn't saying, oh my God, stay awake, this is so exciting. Your brain is like, just relax, just chill. This is reading and spectating and no pressure. No one's trying to win or lose. I'm just watching, I'm doing my thing. Which I think is important, right? I don't always want to be that guy in the arena. It's nice to be the spectator every now and again. Good shots. Good shots, Sabrina. Take that chug. Oh, you saw the gun. You saw it. I don't know that you want to do that. How did you see that guy? Cheating, you loser. Dude, Sabrina is so hot. You think she likes me? Remember how we used to flirt when we were kids? You think she likes me? Yeah, dude, she likes you. No, but likes me. Do you think she likes me? So that was the first introduction to insanity, wasn't it? Liking someone. Oh, dude, no, go. Get out of there. I wouldn't play this. They have high ground. I wouldn't play this. You gotta get level. Who? What? Oh. I thought there was still a person in there. This person is going full blown with the Sabrina stuff, man. I mean, they are completely getting the pink car, the Barbie. Oh, sweetheart, no. This is Sabrina driving. Sabrina. Sabrina and cars, they just don't go together, I guess. Come on, Sabrina. Come on. I'm rooting for Sabrina here. She's got, 6 kills? 18 left. If she can reposition, get a little high ground, hopefully not too much in the center of the circle, I think she's okay. Wow, what a move. I don't think that was necessary, but, what do I know? For me, 6 kills in solos is a great day, so. You think Sabrina's gonna chill the hell out and just, chill out at one of these hills? You think she's just gonna chill the hell out? Oh, she wants to go to a black market for what? You got a good loadout, man. That's, yeah, huge play. Huge value. I don't think there's anything down there you're going to want. I mean, unless they have that rift. Oh, dude. If she can get, yep. Wow. This is going to be huge. This is going to be huge for Sabrina. Oh, dude. Oh, my gosh. She's just picking up loot. Oh, get out of there. Yeah, nice. Look at you. I wonder if she could rift the bot. I wonder if that's a thing. Unfortunate that she has to lose her car. But Sabrina always finds her car. There you go. Yeah, she sees it. She sees it. I don't know that you want to spend too much time looting here. Oh my gosh, she is heart of the cardsing loot right now. I don't know if you don't want to take that chug. That's massive value, dude. My opinion, that porta bunker, whatever you have, needs to go. That's just me. I couldn't focus. I was watching Sabrina do what Sabrina does. I still have no fucking clue who this is, by the way. I have no idea who Sabrina is. This smells of just corporate puppetry being sold onto kids of these days. Right? Good shots. Good third party. Great third party. Another dill coin if you want it. I don't think you need that porta bunker. I really don't. I think you're making a huge mistake not taking that chug. Sabrina about to... Oh, she's going to use one of those Karibos. Go ahead. Don't lose your rift gun now. Go ahead. Oh, you see the car. You see the car. Get your own. Get your own. Oh, no. Just... Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't know if you want to be so loud about this. I mean, you kind of want to be a little more stealthy, don't you think? Hold back a little. Hold back a little. I don't know you. I don't know if you want to take these shots, right? I mean, you're not blending in. You're pink, right? But you know. Yeah, play that rock. Play that rock. Smart play. Smart play. Smart girl. I don't know if that was... I don't think this hurts you, but I don't know if this helps you either, because this is a weird hill. Yeah, play in between these two rocks. This is a better play. I like this. I don't know if you have to... Oh, you do have to go to the tippity top. They have a jump pad there for you as well. I mean, as long as nobody's trying to... Oh, great shots, by the way. As long as nobody's trying to get on that hill with you. I don't think that's anybody, is it? It is. Take that jump pad. What are you afraid of? Yeah. This is a repositioning play. This is not a good hill to die on. I don't think so. It's a little too skinny, not much running room. You do have high ground, but you don't have, you know, somebody gets up there with a bat with you and you're not, you know, they just got to hit you one time. You're not, oh, jeez, man. Yeah, see what I'm saying? That's not going to help you. I argue that hurts you because now the jump pad's gone. That was a rough play. Oh, you got a rift. You got a rift. You got a rift. Wow. Wow. I don't. Yeah, that was not a play. Great shots, minus touch, minus gun, whatever it's called. Now this dude's kind of stuck up there. This is not a great hill to play. Yeah, that's a smart move. Probably didn't care about that rift gun. I'm not crazy about it either, but you know. You know, when I use the rift or the drill, I fall to my death. Might just be a glitch or, you know, mild racism, whatever. It is what it is. It's good use of the drill. What are you trying to do? What are you doing? I like that. I like that. I don't know what you just did, but I like it. Alright, I like this player. Not trying to be too cute with it. Just trying to, you know, get OW. What are they on? 12 kills. A very good game for them. Or maybe not. What do I know? But look at that. Going from bush to bush. Wow. Wow. Talk about shots. Jeez, that dude needs to heal up now. Top 3. I mean, you're going to chase, and I support this, but, you know, keep your eyes careful. Ooh. It's kind of dirty. It's kind of foul. Have you showered? This dude doesn't shower. He's that cool, huh? Probably tunnel. You know what? This player seems pretty cracked, but he also seems like he has a decent level of patience, right? What the f... He saw something. Wow. Wow. Beautiful movement. Beautiful game by that player. Anonymous274. And that is it for the video. See you next time.